So welcome to our session this afternoon on communication styles. So hopefully you all filled out your survey. So we're about to find out what that tells us about you. Okay. Now you might be wondering, well, why? I might have done surveys like this before. So what's it all about? Well, it's about increasing your self-awareness about how you come across when you communicate with others, but it's also about understanding perhaps sometimes why you might have communication clashes with people, and of course how to avoid them. Also, by the end of this session, you'll be able to recognise people that have strong preferences in the 4 different types we're going to look at, and that means you'll have a real head start when it comes to influencing them. So, we've got 4 different types, but it's split up into 2 different things that it's looking for. One is the pace that you like to work at. So at the top, we've got people who like to work at a fast pace, get it done, move on, get it done, move on. And at the bottom, we've got people who like to work at a more measured pace. They want to take a little bit more time to make sure they've done it properly. Then we've got where your focus is. So over this side we've got task focus, so very much focusing on the job itself, and over here we've got people focus. Okay? And when you put those 2 dimensions together, you get these 4 different types. So make sure you've got your scores in front of you for your relaxed scores. Okay. So let's look at this first of all. First of all, we've got yellow expressive. So did anyone have yellow as their highest score? Oh, nobody in the group today. Okay, that's not uncommon, especially in a small group. Well, let me tell you a little bit about expressives. They are fast-paced, you can see at the top. Where's their focus? People, yeah. And they like new experiences, and quite often we think of them as creative types. Okay. So, now I'm guessing we'll have some here. Did any of you come out as green, amiable? Yeah, all 3 of you over there. Okay, interesting, interesting. So, would you describe yourself as a team player?
Yes. Looking around at the team to confirm that.
Great, and that was lovely the way you did look around, Johnny, because actually that's really typical of amiables. You'll get consensus from the team before doing something. So that's a lovely example in practice. Okay, so next round, also at a measured pace, but this time with a task focus, we have analytical. So anyone come up with blue as their highest score here? Susie, okay, great. So this would say that you'd be a really good person to get to check something. You're very good at coming up with plans.
That sounds like me, yeah.
Okay, lovely. Okay, great. And finally, well, we've only got one left, so Claire, would you describe yourself as results driven?
Yes.
Those of you that work with Claire, would you describe her as results driven?
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much, okay, lovely. So she probably quite likes to be in control, is very good at hitting her deadlines.
Yeah, mostly.
So what we're going to do is explore these a little bit more and get you to think about when you're in that style. Now, a couple of things to think about here. One is that any of you won't have had 0 for any of these. So we all do a little bit of all of these at different times. But your scores indicate your preference. So the higher the number for your top score, the stronger the preference. So if you're getting a score of 80, 90, or up to 100, that's a very strong preference. People are going to be experiencing that a lot from you. Okay, so bearing in mind that this is not the only thing about you, but just for this exercise, we're going to play with this preference, okay? So what I'd like you to do, you can see around the room, we've got the 4 different colours. So I'd like you now to move to the place that represents where you are when you're relaxed. Okay, so interesting, we've got 3 amiables over here, which is great, because of course amiables are team players, they love working together, so I'm pleased there's a group of them. Susie and Claire are on their own in the blue and the red corners. Now, I'm not as worried about them because, to be honest, they're going to be focused on the task, so I don't think they're going to feel too lonely. Am I right there? Okay, lovely. Just behind you there, you should find a pen, and Susie, there's one there for you on the floor. So just quickly, could you just have a quick chat amongst yourselves, or in your own mind, and write down 3 points that describe either what's important to you or how you like to work. Okay, so we're just looking for 3 bullet points. Do you remember this?
And I would say I'd like everybody getting along, or relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. So the next thing we're going to do is ask you to come up with a slogan or motto. Doesn't have to be original, but what would be a little motto that describes your communication style?
Oh no!
I love that, Claire. Very simple and to the point, exactly what to do.
When Paul did it, it had a rude word.
Yes, but sometimes drivers can be very direct. Oh, Susie. Plan, measure. So in a moment we're going to get to find out what the others have put, but I'm going to just ask you one more question first. Now obviously you're pretty much perfect, but occasionally any strengths can be taken a bit too far. So what would you say is your allowable weakness? So you can think of this as the things that perhaps other people might find a little bit difficult about working with you sometimes, when you're working in this style particularly.
I suppose that's true.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do, I'm going to be representing the expressives in a moment, and what we're going to do is go around and hear from each of them just to get a much fuller picture of what this type is. And as we go around, I'm going to encourage you to think back to your colleagues at work and see if you can think of anyone that seems to describe them. Because once you get that, you'll really start to have this sink in. So I'm going to suggest we start over here with the drivers, because traditionally drivers don't like to wait too long, so I'm sure Claire won't mind, but let's come on over here. So if you'd like to come over and we'll hear back.
Okay, so the motto is we get things done, and then the 3 points were I prefer to work on my own, I like working to targets, and I like working to tight deadlines, and allowable weakness can be a bit too direct or abrupt sometimes.
Great, thank you, Claire, and very succinctly done, which is no less than we'd expect from a driver. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go around and hear from the other group. So let's start with our.
What are you?
Oh, that's a very good question. Johnny's asked what am I. Now I know some of you have worked with me before. What would you guess I am?
I would say amiable.
That is a good guess. You're absolutely right, Claire. I am actually quite in the middle, but amiable is my preference. Yeah. So I just wanted to tell you a little story about this kind of stuff in practice. Now about 18 months ago, Happy moved to a new office, this training centre here. Before that, our office was somewhere over there. And as we led up to the move, I could really see these different communication styles coming into play in the communication that was going on. We were having quite a lot of team meetings, and Henry, our chief executive, was very excited about a new workplace. And he was saying things like, oh, how do we want it to be when we walk in the building? What do we want it to feel like? What's the experience we want our learners to have? How can this revolutionise how we do things? And he showed slides of Google workplaces and slides and all kinds of things to get us excited and fired up. So I'd like you to guess, based on what we've talked about already, what communication style do you think he might have been?
Expressive.
Expressive, yeah, absolutely. You can guess it straight away. He's expressive. Now, when he had those meetings, there were sometimes other people in the room saying things like, he'd say, what do you really want? What would be amazing? And I'd say, well, I want really good Wi-Fi, I want a desk that works, I want adequate filing space. And we really ought to think about whether we've planned everything and have we arranged for the moving company, and have we got a proper plan in place? So what kind of communication style do you think those people were?
Analytical.
Analytical, yeah. So notice this is a diagonal to diagonal conversation. And it would go a little bit like this, because the more Henry would hear all that detail, the more he'd think, oh, they haven't understood my lovely idea. So he'd say, but how do you want it to feel? Don't worry about the desks and stuff, don't worry about the detail. How do you want it to feel? And the more they'd think, he hasn't understood. We need desks, we need a plan, we need it to work. If you're not careful, you can have these kinds of conversations where instead of adapting, we tend to just keep saying the same thing at one another. Does that ring true for anybody?
And I was in one of those meetings myself, and I remember Henry saying those things, and when he would hear back people saying, but how are we going to do it, what's the budget, all that kind of stuff, you could see him getting a little bit disheartened. It was like someone was saying, all these big ideas, you can't have them.
Lovely, and that's exactly how it feels actually when we're having that. It can be frustrating, but it can also be disheartening, especially for an expressive, because they want to talk about big, lovely, positive ideas, and if you're coming with lots of reality, that can be a bit disappointing for them. So again, we have that little clash that goes on. Okay. Of course, not everyone that works at Happy is either an analytical or expressive, so some other people were saying, have we signed the lease yet? Have we signed the lease yet? When are we signing the lease? Now, which communication style do you think they might have been?
I'm guessing
Driver.
Claire guessed it, of course. Absolutely, the drivers, and that's good. Okay, and so what kind of things do you think the amiables were interested in terms of the move?
Where are people going to sit?
Yeah.
Who's going to be together?
Who am I
Yeah.
sitting next to?
Yeah.
Great. So where am I going to sit? Who am I sitting next to? What else would they want to know?
Is everyone else happy with it?
Yeah. Is everyone else happy? Because for amiables, unless everyone's on board, it's not really good enough. So they wanted to make sure they've got a solution that works for everybody. Okay. So along the way, there were a few of these kind of conversations. I'm pleased to say, well, hopefully you can just look around. We've got a lovely new building. And I don't think it would have been the type of building and the type of training centre it is now if we hadn't listened to all of those 4 types. Luckily, involvement is a key part of Happy's culture, but I'd encourage you to think about that with any project, because when you involve all 4 of these, what have you got?
Balance.
Absolutely, balance. And if you like, the perfect team.
Can I just ask a question? So, what in that example, how did you bring everyone's ideas together so that it worked well instead of it just sort of butting against?
Well, one of it is thinking about planning our communication. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But what else do you think? How could you approach that? I'll tell you what we did, but how do you think we could approach that if you wanted to include all of those 4 types?
Well, one of the things that I think I did, because I was dealing with Henry in this particular example, is I was kind of aware of the kind of things that he likes to hear. So he likes to have good news, he likes to have ideas, he likes to hear when something's going well. And my role was being a bit more the realist. So kind of, trying to explain things like, we do need to have these in place before we can have these nice shiny things. So I would change the way that I spoke to him to make sure that he heard something nice that he could hear, and at the same time I could also explain my side of it. And it took a long time to get to that stage where we could have that kind of communication, and it didn't happen overnight, I think is the point. But it was because I was aware of it, and I think he kind of got a little aware of me as well. That's just my
Lovely.
example.
But that's actually what we're going to move on to next week, that idea that if we want to influence others, the best thing we can do, if we know their communication style, is adapt a little bit to it. And Johnny there, by adapting and sort of framing things positively, letting Henry hear some positives, was enabling him to feel open to hearing some of the other things as well.
Yeah.
So it's about how to influence people. So there is that. Also, the other things we did is make sure that everybody had the chance to speak in meetings, and try and kind of allow that equity of it's okay to talk about filing cabinets. So when we were writing down ideas, we'd write down writable walls from an expressive, but we'd also write down filing cabinets, which may have come from an analytical, but they were given equal merit. Okay, so we've talked a bit more about how it's like to work with one another. So thinking about what you heard when you were walking around the room and finding out more about the different types, and based on the story I just told, I'd like to think about now somebody that you would like to influence. So who would you like to influence? Just take a moment to picture them in your mind and decide which of these 4 you think they are. Do you think they're a driver? Are they quite results oriented, quite direct? Are they analytical? Are they really good at the detail, really good with a plan? Are they the amiable team player, or are they the new ideas person? Okay, give me a little nod when you think you've thought of someone and which type they are. Okay, lovely. So turn into your action page at the back of your yellow books and just make a note of the communication style you think they are, and then how are you going to differ your approach to get the best out of them. So thinking about what they like, you can look around the room to get some clues, thinking about what they like, how are you going to differ your approach so that you can influence them positively?
You can write anything you like.
We're talking about communication styles, but it seems to me that this goes beyond just communication. It seems to go into more about like the way people tend to be in certain situations. Is that fair?
I think so, from what we've described, yeah. I mean, what makes you ask the question?
Because it's say, for example, so I'm a driver when I'm stressed. So actually, I'm not even really thinking about communication that much. It's more in thinking about getting the job done, and I'm very task focused. And that seems to go beyond just the way I communicate with other people or the way I'm listening to other people.
It's more like personality styles,
Yeah.
isn't it? Or work styles.
Almost, yeah.
How you behave.
Absolutely, it is all of those things. And interestingly, this same or very similar model is taught in very different, under very different names, but it's pretty much the same model. So you might hear it called insights, you might hear some people call about the colours more, and some people talk about the names more. And actually a lot of people do talk about it as a personality type. Here we're focusing on it in terms of communication, because of course your behaviour, as you said, if you're feeling under pressure and you're becoming a driver, your head's down, you're actually not communicating. So your behaviour directly impacts those around you, because it does direct your communication. So you're right, in a way it does go deeper. What we're really thinking about here is the team dynamics and how we can get the best out of working with one another. Because remember, actually all 4 of these are perfect. And you know those diagonals that you sometimes clash with? They're the ones that you need the most. Because if you're an ideas person, then what you really need is someone who's great at planning. And if you're a people person, what you need sometimes is someone to keep you to a deadline. So together we've got everything we need. So by focusing on communication here, what we're trying to emphasise is that by tweaking your approach, you can get the best out of everybody. And if people have the experience that working with you is easy, well then they'll just love working with you. You'll be everyone's favourite colleague, whether you're amiable or not.